UFOs are so mysterious because they are all about death. They are death ships. In Greek myth, Charon the Ferryman transported the dead across the river Styx to Hades in a black ferry. A soul needs to travel to the afterlife in a vessel. It's not a case of crossing a physical river, but of traveling across space and then negotiating a trans-dimensional barrier to reach the non-physical afterlife. Charon has a fleet of UFOs to take the dead to their destination. Anyone who encounters a UFO is seeing a soul leaving the world in a special soul craft, which is controlled by thought. The thoughts of the dead, necro-thoughts. UFOs are not alien spacecraft. They are transcendental vessels for transporting the human dead to their new home. Carl Jung believed in a very close connection between mind and matter. Jung wrote, "This brings us a little nearer to understanding the mystery of psychophysical parallelism, for we now know that a factor exists which mediates between the apparent incommensurability of body and psyche, giving matter a kind of psychic faculty and the psyche a kind of materiality, by means of which the one can work on the other. That the body can work on the psyche seems to be a truism, but strictly speaking all we know is that any bodily defect or illness also expresses itself psychically. Naturally this assumption only holds good if, contrary to the popular materialistic view, the psyche is credited with an existence of its own. But materialism in its turn cannot explain how chemical changes can produce a psyche. Both views, the materialistic as well as the spiritualistic, are metaphysical prejudices. It accords better with experience to suppose that living matter has a psychic aspect, and the psyche a physical aspect. If we give due consideration to the facts of parapsychology, then the hypothesis of the psychic aspect must be extended beyond the sphere of biochemical processes to matter in general. In that case all reality would be grounded on an as yet unknown substrate possessing material and at the same time psychic qualities. When a body dies, does their soul leave it and go traveling through the cosmos to heaven? Or does the soul in fact get collected by a Charon ferry, UFO, to take it to its next destination? Or does the exposed soul build a new material shell around itself to protect itself? This is the UFO, and it moves erratically around the world before shooting off into the heavens. Jung wrote, "In view of the trend of modern theoretical physics, this assumption, that matter has a mental component and mind a physical component, should arouse fewer resistances than before. It would also do away with the awkward hypothesis of psychophysical parallelism, and afford us an opportunity to construct a new world model closer to the idea of the unus mundus, one world." Jung's approach to understanding UFOs was to imagine them as mental entities taking on a physical aspect. They are not exactly like physical objects because they are much more closely related to the mind and its thoughts, so they have unusual physical behavior. They are sort of physical, and sort of not. They can be physically tracked for a short period before vanishing. They are like egregores and tulpas. Jung wrote, "The causal correspondences between mutually independent psychic and physical events, i.e., synchronistic phenomena, and in particular psychokinesis, would then become more understandable, for every physical event would involve a psychic one and vice versa. Such reflections are not idle speculations. They are forced on us in any serious psychological investigation of the UFO phenomenon. Physical death produces an enormous trauma for the soul. It now has to free itself of the dead matter. It replaces the physical body with a UFO, a vessel to convey it to the afterlife." Jung wrote, "It boils down to nothing less than this, that either psychic projections throw back a radar echo, or else the appearance of real objects affords an opportunity for mythological projections. If a soul, at death, can produce a huge amount of psychic energy, it can convert some of this into matter, into a vessel, a UFO, to give it a new home until it gets to its new home in the afterlife. Could this UFO, which can be considered a psychic projection, generate a radar track for a while?" Jung proposes that this is the case. The alternative would be that real objects, perhaps not clearly seen, cause the mind, in its attempts to rationalize what the object is, to project its own unconscious interpretations onto it. It sees something alien, as opposed to something mundane. The mind, not the object, creates the alienness of the object. The mind converts some dimly perceived worldly object into a strange alien object. Jung wrote, "Here I must remark that even if the UFOs are physically real, the corresponding psychic projections are not actually caused, but are only occasioned, by them. Mythical statements of this kind have always occurred, whether UFOs exist or not. So, a UFO does not make humans project onto them. Rather, when they appear, humans cannot but project onto them, and have done so throughout history, onto all manner of strange objects, whether in the air, the land or the sea. Could we have USOs, unidentified sea objects, and ULOs, unidentified land objects? All these projections come with a numinous character of a religious or alien nature. The two strands are combined in ancient astronauts theory, which says that the gods of humanity were actually aliens arriving in UFOs. Jung wrote, "These statements depend in the first place on the peculiar nature of the psychic background, the collective unconscious, and for this reason have always been projected in some form. At various times all sorts of other projections have appeared in the heavens besides the flying saucers. This particular projection, together with its psychological context, the rumor, is specific of our age and highly characteristic of it. In the past, the human mind reached for the ship as the vessel to convey souls to its next mode of existence. Now, it reaches for the spaceship. In the future, it will reach for stargates and wormholes." Jung wrote, "The dominating idea of a mediator and God who became man, after having thrust the old polytheistic beliefs into the background, is now in its turn on the point of evaporating. Christianity will not long survive. It is simply not compatible with the modern age." Jung wrote, "Untold millions of so-called Christians have lost their belief in a real and living mediator. This is self-evidently true." Jung wrote, "While the believers endeavor to make their belief credible to primitive people, when it would be so much more fruitful to bestow these much-needed efforts on the white man. The white man tries to tell others that Jesus is real, even as the white man loses all faith in Jesus." Jung wrote, "But it is always so much easier and more affecting to talk and act down to people instead of up to them. That's so very true. People love to talk down to others, don't they? And the Christian white supremacist especially loves it." Jung wrote, "Saint Paul spoke to the populace of Athens and Rome, but what is Albert Schweitzer doing in Lamborghini? People like him are needed much more urgently in Europe. Europe and America need to see reality through new eyes. A way to start is to see UFOs as soul phenomena, giving us a completely new understanding of the processes of death, and how to reach the afterlife." What kind of UFO will you take to reach the afterlife?